Alright, so Moji. Everybody knows her, cute little bunny riding on top of a two-headed dragon, creating mischief everywhere she goes. Well, she's no longer there. She's been turned into a support, so yeah, it's like a complete character assassination. No way. But anyways, what I'm trying to get to is Moji being turned into a support was in no way the solution to any of the problems she had, nor should it be. And to explain why that's the case, let's first look at Moji a season or two ago. When Moji was a flank, her primary fire used to be her familiar spray, a spray that would apply marks on an enemy. Besides applying marks, they would also deal damage, about 30 every 0.08 seconds. 'Her secondary fire was her familiar spit, which would fire a projectile that dealt about 300 damage. And depending on the number of marks the enemy had, damage could be increased all the way up to 1,000. Now, her first ability is her magic barrier. This barrier would basically allow her to become immortal for a short duration.
You can't resist me!
Her second ability was scamper. This ability would allow her to quickly move forward for a short duration. And finally, her ultimate, that being Bon Appetit. Basically, it would allow her to turn an enemy into a cookie,
Yummers.
and then if she was close enough, it would execute that enemy.
Feast mode activated.
Now that we've visited her old abilities, let's look at her old talents.
Yeah!
Her first talent is Smack Attack. This talent would make so that after Moji killed an enemy, they would drop a small health pack that would heal her and her allies for about 900 health. Her second talent was Boom Boom. This would basically make so any mark detonated would basically explode in a small radius, inflicting a small percentage of the damage onto any enemy.
My main goal is to blow up.
Her third talent is Cute. This talent made it so that after she used Scamper, she would heal for about 600 health for a short duration. Now that we've seen how old Moji was, let's take a look now at what Moji has been changed to. Alright, so first let's take a look at her primary form of healing, that being Sparkle. Sparkle is a resource-based heal that, when hitting allies, will apply a mark that can then be detonated to further increase Moji's healing output. secondary fire has remained about the same. It is still spit, except it is a bit slower and does more damage. It still detonates marks when applied.
Thank you.
Her first ability is Magic Shield, which will now apply shields onto her allies and Moji herself for a short duration. Moji's Scamper has basically turned into Victor's Hustle now, as it is slower and lasts until you cancel the ability.
Are we there yet? What a thrill.
Lastly, her ultimate, which has been kept the same except for the fact that it now heals her when executing an enemy. Alright, now that we're done with the abilities, let's see how the talents were reworked. Alright, so first up we have Snack Attack, which has been reworked into Spit Shine. This new talent makes it so that when Moji hits an ally with her spit, she now heals them for 350 health and also increases their movement speed by 20% for 2 seconds. Her second talent, Boom Boom, has been reworked into Jubilation. Jubilation makes it so that you now apply marks onto the enemies, which when exploded would deal about 800 damage. And her last talent, 2, has now been reworked into Realm Runner. When entering Scamper, she now leaves a small magical dust cloud behind that can heal allies for 600 health over 3 seconds. Ah man, quite the change we have here. Swap the purpose of some numbers around, change a little bit of the code here. Extreme amount of work. You gotta applaud the developers. They really put in their hand when working on Moji. It truly shows how much they care about a character like her. Sarcasm aside, let me explain why these changes are just fundamentally flawed and completely hinder her ability to function as both a flank and a support character. Alright, so for this, I decided to make a list of what people really like from a support character and what I personally think a support character needs to be effective and balanced. First of all, they need survivability. They need to be able to either defend themselves when not with their team, or 2, be able to effectively escape the confrontation and regroup with their team. Secondly, utility. Besides healing, a support character needs to be able to do much more than that. That's why they're called a support. They need to be able to have some form of utility, whether that be a boost to the team's stats or a form of debuff to the enemy. And thirdly, what mainly people want from a support, their healing capabilities. How much can they actually heal a teammate? Now that we have like a basis of what a support character needs, let's look at a support character that I personally believe to be the most balanced out of the entire roster. And that character is Maldamba. So to not make this video any longer than it has to be, I'm just going to explain to you what Maldamba has that aligns with what I believe a support character needs. Alright, so first of all, survivability. Maldamba has that. His main weapon being his snake, he can use that. See, when he reloads, he actually launches his snake, and when the snake hits an enemy, it actually stuns them, meaning that gives him time to like get away or kill them. Secondly, he has his actual escape, which is a movement ability. It's called Slither. It basically makes him immune to any damage and makes him quickly slither and forward. Alright, so utility. Maldamba is capable of providing utility to the team. See, Maldamba actually has a card for his primary heal, which actually gives a movement speed buff to any ally that it hits. Secondly, like I mentioned, Maldamba's snake has a stun. This stun is a form of utility as well, as it can help during fights and stun enemies. And also, his secondary heal, which is a gourd that he launches and lingers, actually damages enemies as well as healing allies, meaning that is another form of utility. And thirdly, his ultimate actually is a form of utility. It is a scare that he launches, that when it explodes basically scares enemies. When they're scared, basically enemies can't shoot and they're basically just walking targets. And thirdly, healing. Maldamba's healing is balanced in my opinion. It's both not too much and not too low.
Perfectly balanced, as all things should be.
It is effective enough to be beneficial, but at the same time, not too effective to the point where it completely destroys one of the main mechanics of the game. So now, let's see if Moji really is a good support character. Alright, so survivability. Moji doesn't really have this, to be honest. See, your primary fire is actually your primary heal. It does deal damage, but it is very lackluster, and therefore you have to rely on your secondary fire. Your secondary fire is effective, but it is slow and a bit awkward to use. And in terms of like escapability, she doesn't really have any of that. Her magic shield doesn't grant her immunity, and instead just grants her a little bit of extra health through shields. And her movement ability, well, it is now slow. Her only like ability that she can use to defend herself would be her ultimate. Alright, so utility. Moji doesn't really have much utility other than the movement speed buff that she grants through her talent and her cards. But even then, that movement speed would be extremely detrimental for her because her primary heal also slows her, meaning she is going to be left behind and will not be able to more effectively heal her allies. Alright, so let's look at her healing, which is the only thing she really has. It's OP, it is broken. Her healing numbers are extremely bloated, and her kit is extremely bloated with just pure healing. If you look at her primary fire, it can completely heal a tank without needing to use, the magic marks that are given. But with magic marks, she can output way more than what is necessary. Also, she has 2 talents that are used for healing. As you can see, everything in her kit is designed to just be healing. It's not designed to be a good support. She's just designed to be a healer, not a support. And thirdly, her magic barrier, magic shield. Her magic shield is also healing in a way. It's just extra health, basically. Alright, now I'm gonna elaborate more on the points that I made, but not, tied to what I mean by, what a support needs. Now I'm just going to go directly onto the problems that Moji has. Alright, so let me elaborate on the shielding remark that I made. So, as you may have seen, I did not put her magic shield on utility and instead put it onto healing. This is because of the way that shields function in the game. See, in the game, there are 2 forms of shields. There is a deployable shield and a personal shield. A deployable shield functions as a cover, basically, through which an ally can shoot, but an enemy can't. A personal shield acts as extra health. That is all it does, basically. That is why I put it onto healing, because I see it just as another form of healing, basically. As it just simply increases your health as a whole. Alright, so I want to make another remark regarding Moji's shielding, and that is that it is OP and should not be in the game. The reason Moji's shield is overpowered is because unlike other supports who grant shields, she has it as one of her primary abilities, rather than an optional card or a talent. This is combined with the fact that she can give it to everybody on her team. This makes it so that whenever you're dealing against the Moji, you're almost always going to need to buy Wrecker, because she can always have her shield up. Look, I'm not saying to get rid of every personal shield in the game, but what I am saying is that no support character should have it as one of her primary abilities, and on top of that, be able to give it to everybody on her team all at once. Alright, so now let me move on to something that I didn't actually mention in the previous points. That being her ultimate. And the problem with her ultimate, and why I didn't put it in utility or anything else, is because it is extremely problematic. The way her ultimate functions is basically the same, but now it's on a support character. A support character that, 1, is a priority target for enemies, and 2, needs to be close to, her allies to actually heal them. And her ultimate is completely the opposite of that. Because if you want to use it offensively, you would have to go out of your way to go into the enemy, front lines and try to kill one of them. But that would greatly risk, 1, your survivability, and 2, the survivability of the team, because a majority of the game, you are going to be the only support character, meaning you're the only source of healing. And so, the only way you can really use your ultimate is as a defense tool. But this defense tool can be ineffective if the enemy is not close enough, because when they're a cookie, they are completely immune to any form of damage or CC. And Moji has to be the one to eat them. Nobody else can. Basically, you're just giving the enemy immortality if you aren't capable of eating them. I don't understand why Evil Mojo chose to keep the cookie as an ultimate, rather than changing it into something that would actually benefit a support character. Alright, so let me elaborate on the point that I made, that Moji's movement ability isn't as effective as people think it is. I already mentioned that her scamper is now slow, but that's not the only problem. See, unlike other supports and their movement abilities, since Moji's movement is sustained, she can't gain any other benefit from it. All she really gains is the movement speed buff. But because it is sustained, she can't do anything with it since she can't use her abilities during that movement speed buff. And also, since they made it slower, she is now an easier target because of a large hitbox. And that is the main problem with Moji's movement ability, is that it is tied to Moji. She is extremely large and therefore needs a movement ability that is quicker or grants her some other benefit, because otherwise she is basically an easy target for any enemy. Alright, so when I was talking about utility, I mentioned that the only utility she really had was the movement buff she gave to her allies when using the card or the talent. So now let me elaborate on why the talents that she has are extremely flawed and contribute even more to the problem that she has. See, the thing with her talents, or at least two of them, is that all they really do is heal. They just increase how much healing Moji can do. That is combined with the fact that she already has extreme amounts of healing and also has basically extra free healing with her magic shield. And if you look at something like Realm Runner, she doesn't actually provide any other utility. She doesn't hinder the enemies, she just does more healing. And even then, you're using your movement ability, the one that you use to get away, to heal. That was one of the main problems that Tooth had. But on the other side, if we're trying to, be like old Moji, because, well, new Moji is basically completely opposite of what old Moji was, we'd have to use Jubilation. And Jubilation is absolute shit! Back before the Moji Rework was announced, I was not a very avid Moji player. I was in fact recording footage from another flank because I was making a series. But then I saw the news that Moji was being reworked. Therefore I realized that I wouldn't be able to record this version of Moji. And so what I did was change my plans and decided that I would play her for the remaining of the season. And well, it was fun. It was actually some of the most fun I ever had in Paladins. Her flank playstyle was unique compared to everybody else. She relied more on self-sustain rather than extreme amounts of mobility. It was like nobody else was. And her design, she was very colorful and cute, unlike the majority of edgelords that are in the flank class. And the reason I'm saying this is because Jubilation, in no shape or form, brings back old Moji. I'm getting a little ahead of myself, so let me explain why this is the case. So to recap, the talent basically is supposed to act as, the Moji substitute, a way to play old Moji, in this new Reap. But the thing is that it doesn't really solve any of the problems that current Moji has, and in fact carries them on to old Moji, making her experience even worse. As a side note, the original Jubilation talent didn't even bring back the old Moji mechanics. All it did was just increase your damage and remove your self-slow. But for some reason, they didn't just decide to keep the self-slow, they made it worse. Alright, so first of all, the damage. Unlike old Moji, your damage isn't 1000 once you pop a full mark on an enemy. It is instead 800. And the reason for this is because, well, Moji has been moved into a support class, meaning she isn't allowed to do as much damage as she previously was. Even though the reason they reworked her was because she was underperformed. This is also combined with the fact in which she deals damage, that being through her primary fire, and her primary fire is her main source of healing, or in case of this talent, her only form of healing. Meaning that when she is, targeting enemies, she can't really heal her allies unless they are directly in front of them. Not to mention that her primary fire is on a resource meter, despite the fact that it is now primarily used to damage enemies. And if she actually tried to heal her allies, she would then be without any ammo, meaning she wouldn't be able to actually do damage, the main thing her talent is meant to do. Her magic shield is completely useless when it comes to flanking. It doesn't provide any form of utility or buff. All it does is give her extra health that lasts about 5 seconds. Now, you would think the movement chain would actually be beneficial for flank Moji, as now you are able to more consistently flank, but this isn't exactly the case. See, it still has the many problems that support Moji has when using this ability, large hitbox, still moving slower than what she previously did, and also moving in a very predictable way. This is made worse by the fact that she is no longer able to effectively bunny hop. For those of you who don't know what bunny hop is, it's basically a technique in which if you are going fast and are able to time your jumps correctly, you are able to carry that momentum and then proceed to go great distances. And the reason Moji was able to access this tech was because of her scamper. See, because of the way scamper functioned, in which it greatly increased Moji's movement speed, players were able to cancel early and then, if they timed their jumps correctly, carry on that momentum, basically bunny hopping. But since Rework Moji now has a slower movement speed, she isn't able to effectively bunny hop. She still can, but it is way less effective. Besides bunny hopping being less effective, she also doesn't have access to any form of self-sustain like she previously had, as she previously had access to 2 talents that were able to heal her. But now, she has nothing. She has no way of being able to maintain herself alive. On the subject of her 2 talents, I hear this a lot. Because she had 2 talents that were able to, heal allies, they always say that, oh, she was always meant to be a healer. When that is stupid. Just because a character has a talent that can heal allies doesn't mean that's what the purpose of that talent is. If you look at Toot, the purpose of that talent is more so that you can sustain yourself. Because if you actually try to heal an ally, then you'd end up wasting your only movement ability. The worst part about the Jubilation talent is that it is fundamentally flawed. See, the purpose of the Jubilation talent is to try to bring back old Moji, to appease the old Moji players. But the thing is, old Moji was a flank, and she is now stuck in a support role. Two completely different classes. This makes it so that she now has to worry about her allies because now she is a support and must be able to actually aid her allies in doing something else other than killing enemies. And that's really the biggest problem that Jubilation and just Moji as a whole has. It's the fact that her kit isn't really designed for a support class. She can't be an effective flank while in this role, and even while she's a support, she isn't really effective. The only reason people play her is because of her extreme healing numbers. So to not end this video on like me simply complaining, I would like to actually give some advice as to what could be done to fix new Moji and also fix old Moji. My advice for new Moji would be to make her into an echo channel, because many of the problems that she has are brought up because of the character that they're on, that being Moji, and the way that she is designed. And like Omen, she should still have a similar feel to Moji, just not as, Moji, as something else, an echo champion. Hell, I'll even give her a name. I'll call her Yomi. Get it? Because this new Moji was introduced in like a Japanese thematic. Alright. So first of all, let's tackle my main problem with support Moji. That being her magic shield. I'd recommend you actually get rid of this, honestly. It is extremely detrimental to the game, and it ruins the overall enjoyment of it. A support character should simply not have a shielding ability. So instead, I will make it so that during the duration of the ability, she will create a circle around herself in which she will heal allies and give them a movement boost. This effect will also linger for about 3 seconds. Alright, so for her primary fire, I say to keep the same idea, the one that she can use it to either damage enemies or heal allies, except now it is no longer on the resource meter and it no longer applies a soft slow, but it will have reduced the healing. Alright, so for her secondary fire, she should have it exactly the same, except that now when she bursts the magic marks of her allies, they actually heal for like about 1,300 at max. So to not leave her defenseless, I would make it so that her movement ability now is faster and also makes her invulnerable during the duration. It will no longer be infinite. I would say to completely change her ultimate, honestly. Make it into something that would actually benefit the team. Like, maybe it now launches an explosion that, if it hits an enemy, it will stun them for a really short duration. And if stunning is too OP, then maybe just a simple knockback and a slow. Basically just give them a debuff. Alright, so now onto the talents. So, Spit Chime. Alright, so I'd say to keep the same idea that it gives increased healing and also increased movement speed. But instead of being on her secondary fire, it is actually activated when she pops a magic mark on her ally. Alright, so for her second talent, I'd completely get rid of Jubilation and instead make it so that her primary fire now applies a burn effect onto enemies. don't worry, her magic marks will not be removed so that her healing is not hindered. Alright, so for her third talent, I'd completely get rid of Realm Runner and instead make it so that whenever she activates, like her magic barrier, she actually now grants shields onto nearby allies. I'm doing this so that people can still have the enjoyment of applying shield, but it is now tied to a talent, meaning it is not so annoying to deal with. I didn't make many drastic changes because I myself like the idea of a close range healer. It's just that I don't like the idea of removing a character to make place for them. That's why I decided to keep a lot of things. But I did change some things because some of these things that Moji's rework had were just extremely problematic. Now, let's move on to my recommendations for Old Moji, aka Flank Moji. Alright, so her main form of damage I feel should be kept the same, keep it being her familiar spray and her familiar spit. Keep that, equation of having to apply marks onto an enemy and having to burst them. The only thing I would really change is to remove the self-slow that she has on her primary fire. Secondly, I say to keep her magic barrier the same. It functions perfectly, honestly. I think it's one of her better abilities. I know this is a hot take, but I already, explained why I believe Moji benefits from a quicker movement ability than a movement ability that is more sustained. So for that, I'd say to return old scamper. Now, since this kit for Moji doesn't really work because of her large hitbox, I believe she needs something to compensate for that, a form of self-sustain if you will. So for this, I have two ideas. Either make Toot into base kit and make it no longer heal allies, or instead make it so that her magic barrier now also heals her while it's active. And if you think this is OP, please remember that Buck also has a self-heal. And he, also like Moji, has a large hitbox. And he, unlike Moji, is considered to be one of the best flank champions in the game. Alright, so her ultimate. Honestly, keep it the same. I really like it for Moji, and it makes sense for a flank to have an execute that you can instantly use. Now, for the talents, I wouldn't really change much of them. Honestly, the only talent I would really change would probably have to be Toot. Since one of my ideas is to change Toot into base kit, it wouldn't make sense to have that talent. So instead, I would replace it for a movement talent that would actually increase your jump capabilities after you use scamper. This would be very beneficial for Moji, as one of the main complaints people have when playing her is that they can't deal with enemies that are flying or too high up. Now, before I end this video, I'd like to have some closing comments. First of all, if you don't care about Moji, then that's fine. I can understand that, honestly. But you should still care about that a character that has existed in the game for a long time was completely changed because some people didn't like her. And that is something that you should simply not accept. This could happen to any other character that Evil Mojo either finds hard to balance or they find themselves in need of new content. So to summarize, this is basically what the Moji rework looks like.
Get him up, let him get up, let him get up, let him get up. Fight back! Fight back! Fight back!
And yeah, that's basically all I wanted to say about the subject. But before I go, Moji Games. I plead unto you. Grab your brushes, pencils, computers, whatever it may be, but grab it and use it to spread this message. We must not allow Evil Mojo to trample over the time several players have invested into our character, thus ignored for oh so long, forgotten by their very creator. So I implore you, make art, whether that be a drawing, an animation, or even just a simple text. Whatever it may be, just do it. We cannot let ourselves be pushed by the people who ignored her and still believe they know what she means. So I say this once more. Grab whatever is at your disposal and make art.